back again with another episode of the Hood Health Report. I'm your girl, KV.
And I'm Celine.
And today, we are going to talk about an issue, a problem that has been long-standing. It's nothing new. It's just they reinstate it every so often because new books are coming out and, more empowerment tools are coming out. So they have to make sure that they do everything they can to keep certain demographics dumbed down or, not knowledgeable about our history. So today, if you haven't caught on, we are talking about the book ban that is going on in Florida and some other states as well.
So, KV, do you think that public schools should learn about topics such as Holocaust, slavery, LGBT identity, anything of those sorts?
I think so, because I think that when you show children that they're the only people that exist in their environment, that causes a lot of problems. And then you get into history repeating itself, and then you get into people not finding representation in the books that they read, whether it's because they're Black or they're Latino or they're queer. People need to see themselves in the literature that they read.
So different backgrounds, everybody's exposed to different experiences. When you're not exposed, then it's harder for you to relate to other people in a sense. And that's what I found out from this first article that we had. It was called "What Are We Protecting Children From by Banning Books?" And something that I found interesting was they were talking about knowledge being power. And the moment you start taking the knowledge of books out of schools and stuff of that nature, then children aren't as empowered to make their own decisions. They're basically learning what they're learning and nothing past what they have learned or what the school is teaching them. So they do go into the recent ban that is going on, and it has a lot to do with Republicans because they are in opposition against gun control, climate science, all those topics. But when it comes to things like race or LGBT community or identifying as something, then they have no problem trying to make sure those things are banned.
Right. The crazy part about this article and just book banning altogether is the fact that a parent can say, well, I don't want my child reading this book, so nobody should read this book. And that could potentially lead to that book being taken off the shelves or taken off that curriculum completely for, whatever that district is, whether it's statewide, whether it's citywide, however the schools are governed. But that's ridiculous to me because, just because one parent feels that way, okay, well, if you feel that strongly, maybe your child can do an alternative to this book. But to say that no child can read this book for, their literature components of class it was very crazy to me.
Yeah, and then some of the books that they're banning, they're like staples for me. They're some of my favorite books. So the fact that they're taking those books away, they're not even giving students an opportunity to even indulge in those types of literature. And it's a lot of times kids won't be exposed to that stuff unless a teacher says, hey, you have to read this book, and then they're introduced to something or introduced to a topic. They won't even have that opportunity to be introduced to those topics anymore.
Yeah, I saw a lot of the books that I've read from high school that were on the required reading list in high school are now banned books. Yeah. So that was really wild to think of. On top of the tools, the guidelines that they were using to ban the books. So they use buzzwords, inflammatory words like books are containing pornography and things of that nature when it just might mention someone who is discovering their sexual identity. Just because you're realizing what pronouns you want to be called or how you feel or how you want to dress and express yourself has nothing to do with pornography, and that doesn't make it something that should be banned throughout the schools.
Yeah, so another article, it was what Florida doesn't want you to know about book bans. That you talked about basically somebody finding out their sexual identity. A lot of the books that are being banned, they're targeting things, and some of the ones that they're targeting, the books don't even mention as far as even people kissing one another. The article says the majority of books that were targeted don't even mention a kiss in them. But however, the issues like racism abortion rights, gun control, gay rights, and other topics encourage kids to think for themselves. And that's more of the reason why a lot of times books are banned, because a parent, I get it. I'm not a parent, but I guess when you are a parent, it kind of makes you more. You wanna control what your kid is exposed to and stuff of that nature. But I feel like if they're not exposed to it in a healthy way, which is in school, I think that's probably the most safe zone that you can outside of the house. If they're not exposed to it there, would you rather them find out this stuff like on the internet, because it's going to be seen some kind of
somewhere.
Way. Yeah, and I would rather it be in one of those environments. But that's where they're finding a lot of the stuff is getting. The reason why they're targeting it is because they're saying stuff like pornography when it's not even a kiss or anything of that sort even mentioned in the book.
So that brings me to the next question. Is there a topic that you think is too adult for a high school student? And I want to ask everybody in the room that, because I think that's a very important question, because some people would think that finding out about their own sexuality and things like that might sway a child to lead this way than the natural path that people want their children to be. So I'm wondering, do you agree with that? Or what age do you feel these things would be appropriate?
Okay, so I don't necessarily think there isn't any something that shouldn't be talked about in school. But I will say this: when I was growing up, I was very guarded. So a lot of stuff I went to college, I found out for the first time. There ain't no person wrong about nothing. So like, I was just like, whoa, like this is crazy. And I feel like in a sense of it, a part of me was a lot more judgmental towards a lot of other people because I just didn't know. So it's like I'm being, I guess, woken up in a sense. And it's just like it was a lot for me to take in. So I do feel like if you're in high school, I think it's a way it should be presented. I'm not saying like go out there and just have them like watching films about certain things, stuff of that nature, but like definitely like allow kids to see different things, because when they get in the real world, they're gonna see those things and they're not gonna know what to do in those situations. So I don't think there's anything that's too adult. I do think like it should be censored, but there should be some kind of like format or like, it can't just be because a parent thinks it is inappropriate. Like if you feel like it's inappropriate for your kid, okay, maybe you read the book. They said a lot of times the kids aren't even, the parents
didn't even read the book.
They're just thinking that it's going to be about racism or something that they don't want their kids to hear about. So they're like, oh, I want this banned. Like, no, do your research too. If you're going to be a parent and say, I don't want my kid to read this at school, then you should read the book first, have a reason behind it, or maybe even try to explain it to your kids, because at the end of the day, they're not going to be exposed to those things. They're going to get out into the real world and not have those like life skills to know how to handle those situations.
So this article was interesting to me because this is the article that was written by the author, right? It was an article that was written by the author and by an author, and she had like 60, 70 something books. She said at least 20 of them was banned on this last round of being banned. And she mentioned the different themes in the books. Like you said, it might talk about a school shooting. It might talk about someone discovering their identity, things of that nature. So it's like the parents could literally probably just hear from another friend or do a random Google search to see, oh, this book talks about this, and then make a decision that ultimately could affect the entire district. And although there is a review process, I think they have like a 15 to 30 day turnaround where the parents would object to the book would be completely removed, but within those days, the principal or media specialist, they called it, would have to read the book, review the book, and then give a verdict on, do we put it back on the shelves or do we remove it from the curriculum? And what they would do is ban, like, what's the word? Challenge. So what they would do is challenge dozens of books at a time, 100 books at a time. So there's no way for the media specialist or the principal or somebody within that school to read all of these books, have them reviewed by the board, and then make a verdict. So
yeah, because when they're in the challenging state, then they what they can do when they're challenging it, the students can't read the book. So since they're being challenged, and most of the time they're not able to, get the book back on the shelf in a 30-day period, the book is just to the point where the kid can't read.
Right.
Their school don't want their children to learn that they threw rocks and broken bridges when she tried to integrate the school. And it's literally that. They don't want essentially their evils, their wrongdoings, the things that have happened in the past that people look at negatively or was just clearly wrongdoing. They don't want people to know about that. And it's like I mentioned in last week's episode, when I was substitute teaching and I realized slavery was taken out of the books. So that's, a clear way of them trying to stop us from being woke, from knowing how we got here, what we're doing here, and advancing ourselves as a whole people. So the Stop Woke Act is to avoid materials that provoke feelings of guilt, anguish, or other forms of psychological distress. And that made me laugh because it's like you're psychologically distressed that we're telling people that your ancestors enslaved people. That distresses you. So just imagine how black people feel. And absolutely, we should know these things. It should not be taken out of the books because it'll make some white student cry to know that their great great grandparents did such things.
And also, that's a great time for you to have a conversation with your kids or grandkids if that was something you were doing. How have you grown? It's called self accountability. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that, but that's really what it boils down to. Instead of just wanting to have a conversation, they would rather wipe it all underneath the rug and act like it didn't happen. That's not going to help the current generation. It's not going to help generations to come.
And they literally said they don't want the children to feel compassion. They don't want them to feel empathy for people that aren't like them. They don't want them to learn about these things because they'll grow and expand as a person. It's teaching them to be free thinkers, teaching them to think for themselves. And they literally said they don't want for students to think for themselves.
Yeah, it's all about controlling the narrative.
Other topics that are included in the book bans are abortion rights, gun control, gay rights, racism, and other things that would teach them to think for themselves. This article ended off with a quote: "If you want to control the thoughts of a nation, you start by controlling what they read." Okay, I gotta ask you this question. So, Celine.
Yes.
How would you feel if you were back on campus and the administration told you that your sorority could no longer use the campus for any meetings or activities that you guys wanted to hold because it's a black organization and you're basically teaching critical race theory?
Ooh. I would be, first of all, disappointed in our administration because what I'll say is, of course, I'm a part of an organization. My thoughts are still my own thoughts. I would be disappointed in the administration. It's so much that black organizations do for campus beyond just being black. It's a safe space for certain people. We are very inclusive. We don't just only support ourselves, we support non-Penn Council activities just like our own. So to say that they would be to the point where they wouldn't want us on campus, it would honestly be disheartening just because a lot of the times black organizations are not funded the same way that other organizations on campus are funded. So we need that space. I was also the financial treasurer and vice treasurer when I was on campus. So I used to look at like the amounts of money that we would receive. And without being on campus, it would be hard for us to host events. It would be hard for us to, actually give back to the community. A lot of stuff we do is already volunteer based on top of that. So to imagine them saying that they wouldn't want that on campus, it's just like, on what grounds, past the fact that it's a black organization, what grounds would you not want somebody to be supporting, to be uplifting? Those are all things that I feel like black organizations do. They don't just do it for one particular group, they do it for all groups. So I would be very disappointed in I would be heated. That would be like one of those times where I'd be like, okay, well, we need to just talk about everybody needs to have a conversation about, what it is they do on campus. Because I feel like black people on campus do a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with everything you said. This article talks about a bill that wants to ban college activities, not just black sororities and fraternities, but also black student unions can't even exist or receive college funds for their activities. So they did use that loophole, like you said, with black organizations, a lot of their money is coming from administration. But with the white organizations, of course, they have these wealthy members who will give back and will
sponsors, all those
sponsor these things when the school might, tighten the reins on what's happening. So there's definitely some disproportionate access going on there.
Yeah, and when you brought that up, it just made me think about you touched on it a little bit earlier, the critical race theory. A lot of times that's what they try to use in order to like say, that this is the reason why they want to ban something. That the article that you're mentioning, it says that for that bill, it doesn't have a defined statement for the critical race theory, but that's what y'all are holding, this bill accountable for. Like you're saying, well, the reason why we're doing this is because of the critical race theory, but y'all don't even have a definition on what the critical race theory is. So I thought it was important. So I pulled the definition up because I want people to know what the critical race theory is, because some people might not have even heard of this. So it's a set of ideas holding that racial bias is inherent in many parts of Western society, especially in its legal and social institutions, on a basis of having been primarily designed for or implemented by white people. And they also said that with this, the reason why they want this bill passed is because it's lack of educational value. There's no educational value in it, and I guess in organizations that support or have anything to do with Black people.
They were trying to take down an upper level African American studies class too, saying that it lacked educational value and that it's.
So whose history is important? That's where I started thinking, like, you're saying this has no educational value, but y'all are willing to teach American history at elevated levels. So why who's to say that African American history isn't just as valuable to know, or that people should know about their ancestry or what happened in their society and communities. A lot of times when Black kids are on campus, they're not around, unless you go to HBCU, they're not around a lot of people like them. And you're taking what little community they do have and trying to distort it. Basically like how they did in the past, same thing. You're distorting history. You're not allowing people to be in groups where they can feel comfortable, where they can learn something about themselves or other people. Yeah, a lot.
I think the most shocking part for me about this article was this is talking about college. So it's like this is when people are entering adulthood, and when else would you talk about these things like racism and LGBTQ issues and abortion rights or civil rights? When else would be the time to talk to people unless you just don't want them to know it at all?
Yeah.
So that's the problem that we're facing. So
when you're in high school, you're too young.
Yeah.
In college, you don't need to know about it.
And that's the thing, I'm paying for these classes, so I would want to be able to take an African American studies class or be able to join a Black student union so that I can, feel closer and know exactly what's going on with the history of Black people. As far as what's the top of that sentence?
I would like to be included in a Black youth student union. That's what you were saying.
You're paying for these classes and you want to know about these things and be a part of, like.
Okay. You ready?
5, 4, 3, 2.
So as a college student paying for these classes and paying for tuition and everything to be on campus, I would want the ability to go to an African American studies class or join a Black student union. And even though I am, for HBCUs, I don't think that Black people should have to go to HBCUs to learn about their history.
I agree. And being a part of like a Black organization, I also was part of the BSU at our school. You just learn so much about inclusion. That's what they're trying to say that you're not doing. That's part of it too. Like they're saying, like you're not including everybody. That's not necessarily the case. Or at least for the school I went to, we dealt with issues outside of just Black or we dealt with issues for minorities in general. A lot of times, a lot of minorities are overlooked in PWIs. They don't have a voice. And I feel like if you take away certain classes, you take away like organizations, you're stripping those people of what little voice they do have.
This article also mentioned that they're trying to ban certain majors, such as gender studies and women's studies altogether, because again, they don't want the minorities to learn about themselves, be more empowered to do more things.
Which is interesting because if you don't have those classes, how do we have people that are able to, talk about that in community? So like, if you don't have a gender studies class, or you don't have like reproductive classes, it's already a known fact that Black women have a hard time with birth and stuff of that nature. It just starts to like trickle into the health field and stuff like that. Like you're taking away classes that people need, in a sense. Like they're trying to say that they're not needed, but they clearly are needed. So what's the real reason why everybody is saying no, this isn't needed? Okay, I'll do the next one. So, do you think that sheltering kids from different ways of life can be a negative effect? What's your viewpoint on this?
I do think that it can have a negative effect because, like we mentioned earlier, it causes kids to lack empathy.
Yeah.
So if I don't know that there are people who, might not have dinner every night and, who might have lived different lives overseas and things of that nature, I wouldn't know that technically, America is a privileged country and we don't have to deal with a lot of those third world problems. So, that's another thing that will be taken out of the books because that's a whole different history. It's a whole different culture. Those people didn't just wake up poor one day. Someone probably took something from them. So we can't learn about those things either. So it's just a lot that, yeah.
You have a child. So like for you, I feel like this kind of like probably resonates more because you're going to be raising a meaning person to go out into the world and see these types of things. Eventually she's going to go to high school, she's going to go to college. And do you think that this is creating unrealistic lifestyles for her if she was to be in school and let's say they ban books? Because like some of the books they're banning, like I said, they're like staple books for me. They taught me so much about myself and like things that I wanted to know about. So do you feel like that might cripple you as a parent, or like how do you feel about still introducing maybe her to those things when she gets of age?
So the book ban, honestly, it makes me want to homeschool my child. I think it's really ridiculous. Like there were even books banned out of daycares and kindergarten classes. I saw one of her favorite books, Hair Love. Matthew Cherry, the author, he tweeted out, he was like, "Yo, my book has been banned as well." And his book is a children's book called Hair Love that teaches a little girl that to love her hair. Your hair does different things. You can wear different hairstyles. No, you're not gonna have hair like everybody else's, but that's what makes you unique. There's nothing bad about that. There's nothing that should be censored from my 2-year-old being able to be empowered and love her hair. So it was really major to me. My husband and I, we already talk about homeschooling our child anyway, just because, like I said, I know that these aren't new ideals. These things have been long-standing. Them taking out history or rewriting history altogether. So this kind of just really drove it home for me because she's 2 now. By the time she's 5, these books might be banned nationwide. It's just in Florida now, but if Florida and Arizona go ahead and bans the book, then the parents are gonna. They mentioned. I'm not gonna say I don't want to give them any shine, but they mentioned a mom group that goes around and here's from chapter to chapter, from state to state. They're like, these are the books that we just got banned here. Here, go forth and get these banned in your county. So there's literally mom groups that set out to do this. So of course, by the time she's school age, I feel like a lot of these books will be banned. And like I said last week, I don't want to be in a situation where I send her off somewhere for 8 hours to learn things, and then she comes home and I have to tell her, well, they didn't teach you that quite right, so let's go over everything in history that they taught you, and I'll teach it to you correctly.
And then your child, because with children, you tell them something, you teach them something, they want to teach their friends. They go back to school, now they're in trouble. Why is your child talking about these things we're not supposed to talk about? And then it's kind of like silencing her in a sense. Like she can't even speak on her experiences or experiences that you've had, so that she can teach other people about those experiences.
And I would definitely have that child that's like, well, my mama said this.
Right.
My mama and daddy said black people was stolen and brought here.
Right.
Absolutely.
Take her out the classroom. She's talking to me.
Now she's suspended because she's trying to tell the kids about slavery.
Right.
So yeah, no, I think if things keep moving in this direction, I could totally see
And I can see
us using alternatives.
Which for me too is so weird because last week we were talking about this. I've been a big public school because I feel like it teaches you character. I just don't know what kind of character they teach you no more. So I'm like, when you say stuff like that, it makes me think like, well, if I was to ever have children, or when I have children, like, would I have the same mindset? Because the times are going to be so different. It's like, if things keep on progressing the way they're progressing, I know I'm more of a forward person. I would want my child to have opportunities to learn things, and I feel like right now, that's not the way things are going.
This article also mentioned like, why would we put such a burden on books and teachers to ban them if we already have a teacher shortage?
Yeah.
So it's like you're already not paying them enough. You're already working them too hard. They already have too many kids in their classroom than what the correct ratio should be. And then on top of that, you want to add this extra stress of them having to remove books, come up with more curriculum. Like, it's just too much. And they said it definitely could affect the teacher ratios and the teacher shortage and the retention of teachers coming back, because COVID already did a number on the teacher ratio. So it's like to just want to pile on more and more. But they don't really want public schools all that much anyway. So, and we were watching Abbott Elementary. We were at Abbott Elementary, and they were fighting to not have the school be a charter school, because the charter schools, sometimes they're looked at as, oh, the bottom line is the dollar we get paid per student. We don't have to house the neighborhood kids. It's a lottery system. So it's crazy how, you see that shift in schooling really happening, and, you just have to pay attention to it, especially if you have children. Pay attention to it, even for your nieces and nephews, so that you can know what's really going on out there.
I agree.
I have to use the restroom. Do your thing.
Hey, take 5.
The reason I asked you that question is because whenever a book is banned, most of the time it's to target some form of truth. And this article, the Anti-CRT article, is talking about the 66 gag orders that have been introduced in more than 25 states across the country, and how there are severe restrictions on how American history will be taught, and about school segregations, and how those conversations will even happen in classrooms. And the one that I felt like would be very important for us to mention is that there was a law in Tennessee passed. It is there was a law in Tennessee passed. It's the SB623 bill, and basically this bill was passed in 2021, and it just more so states that if the school is teaching about white privilege, racism, critical race theory, then they can remove that information from the schools, or if they were to talk about it, if they mention it in ways, I guess, that hold those conversations. You're not supposed to, they're basically not using the funding. They don't want to use funding for those kind of conversations. And if you're found to be having those kind of conversations in the school system, then you can be fined, or they'll take away the funding for that program, because they don't want those conversations to be introduced to students. So it's basically silencing Black voices and their lived experiences. And on top of that, most of the titles that they're putting this order on affect or are written by colored people or people of color. So that means that group is out, the LGBT community as well, and other groups that are already marginalized. Yep. Yep. That's what they did. That's what they doing. And then, jeez Louise. And how can I do this last one? You can ask me that question and then I guess I can just say the parts about it. It just asks like, do you think the books should serve as mirrors and windows to reflect and represent children?
Celine, do you believe books for young people should serve as both mirrors and windows to reflect and represent children and people in our society and world?
I do. I think it's important for a child to like have some representation. And I keep on saying this, a lot of the books that are on that list that they're trying to ban, I feel like were so important to me. The Hate You Give was on that list. Some books by Toni Morrison. I think The Bluest Eye was on there. Perks of Being a Wallflower.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
These books, they have so many other like themes and importances that you can learn life experiences through if you were to read them. And I feel like when they start taking those books out of classes, what is it that they're trying to avoid a child from learning, or like what themes or life choices are they trying to keep a child from learning? So I do feel like it's important for the books that they are reading to reflect lived experiences and also things that might not even be happening now because it happened for a reason. And the only way that history doesn't repeat itself is if you know the history. And if you're telling them a false part of the history, then they're not getting the full story, so they're bound to repeat it.
Definitely. And representation definitely matters. Like, even though my child is 2 and we control everything that she's seen up until now, she still gets excited to see a little black girl with her hairstyle on the TV, or if we're watching a show and it might be predominantly white, when a little black kid comes up, when a little black girl comes up and talks about her hair, she gets excited. So if that's coming out of a 2-year-old that, she's feeling empowered by seeing someone that looks like her, we definitely need that throughout all stages and ages of life. So as we were preparing for this episode, it definitely made me think of another banned book, which was one of my favorite books growing up, which is crazy to see now because it's literally what we're living in. And that book is Fahrenheit 451. You guys may have heard of it. It was made into a movie starring Michael B. Jordan. So we're going to review the movie and just kind of talk about some of those themes and how they're directly related to what we're dealing with today.
So we're going to rate this on like a 0 to 10, or how are you going to rate it?
I would rate it, I'd say an 8.5. I'd say an 8.5. I know that the theme wasn't going to be as close, to the book to the story as the book was, but they still told the story well and adapted it to the times that we're in now. What about you?
I would give it an 8. It was really good. I wasn't like the way they did the review on like when you can pull it up. I was expecting it to be horrible, and I kind of wonder. I'm like, did they do stuff like that on purpose? That's what it kind of seemed like, because if you watch the movie was not created in a way where I feel like the score should be as low as they gave it. And I feel like they also didn't even do a good job of like promoting the movie, but it's also because of what the movie is pertaining to, which is banning of books or burning books up and finding people or killing people because they're reading and have access to knowledge.
We can review we can go through the storyline a bit for the people that never read or seen the movie. So the main character is Michael B. Jordan, and he plays the character Montauk. And he is kind of like second in command for the fire department at this point. His boss is John Beatty, and he's like kind of like an uncle figure. He worked with his dad in the fire department. So once the dad was no longer there, he took a liking to Montauk's character and really trained him up through the fire station. So one thing that, like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, yikes, this is crazy, was the Yuxi. So Yuxi was basically Alexa, but Alexa never turned off. So if I would walk into the room and not turn on the light, Yuxi would be like, why didn't you turn on the light, KV? Like, Yuxi was just always there watching.
Right,
is everything okay? You didn't take your eye drops today. So in the story, well, in the movie, they have to take eye drops, and the eye drops, whatever it's formulated with, it helps to wipe their memory. So they don't have these memories of whatever life was like before we burned books. So in this setting, firemen don't put out fires, they burn books. They want to keep people from learning the knowledge and learning about themselves. They have the same reasoning for banning the books because, oh, it had sexual themes, or, oh, it talked about racism, or it talked about things that people didn't need to know, or you know.
Basically also accusing the books of not having any truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They were saying that some of the books were made up because basically the themes of them or what they were depicting were people being shined in a bad light. So it's like, even in the movie, they kind of they dance around it, but they talk about the white guilt. And it's crazy to me because Beatty's character was talking about white people as if he wasn't a white person. So that was the part that had me like, okay, they have literally like remove themselves from what is going on. I'm a fireman. I'm not a white person. You're not a black person. We're firemen. So as they call it, we're salamanders. They were the salamanders, and the bookkeepers were the eels. So they were going to wipe off the identity. They would literally put some contraption on their hand to wipe off their fingerprints and mark them with a scarlet letter to let everybody know in the town that they were eels. And this was broadcasted on the 9, as they call it, but it was the internet, their version of the internet. And on the 9, I think they said they had 3 books that they could read. Just
Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the other 2, but definitely the Bible was one of them.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember it either. But it was only 3 books that they could read, and the 9 was broadcasted across the town. Like, there was just this hologram picture of whatever was happening when the firemen went to go burn people's books and burn the houses. This was literally broadcast on the 9. So the movie kind of opens up with them raising up the new generation of children to hate books and do a book burning demonstration. And why do we burn? For happiness. So reading the books caused too much anguish, too much guilt, too much hurt from the past. So the ignorance was bliss, and they literally burned books to remain happy. So the first house they end up going to, these people were so advanced because they had all of they didn't even have I didn't even see paper books when they first went into the house. They just were uploading books consistently, just making sure that they had a backup file of all of the books that they had. And, ooh, hold on. And so they burned all of the hard drives and burned up the house. And like I said, they identified the people as eels and took away their identification from their fingerprints. And it was interesting that it was a database and library and not libraries like it was in the book, of course. So that's one of the instances of them bringing it a little current. Like, they did burn some libraries. There were some people who had physical books, and they had physical books in the back of their home, but they had already uploaded those things to the database. And then the people, what I thought about earlier, when they didn't think of themselves as people anymore, they were like, well, I'm Toni Morrison, Song of Solomon, and she's, whatever book you wanted to memorize.
That's how they would more so remember the book, that way they could have it to pass on.
Instead of relying on reading the book, they literally, each person in their tribe remembered the books, and the golden child, I guess you would say, he was just a master at remembering all of the books. He was like, test me, just pick up a book. And he'd pick up a book and reading like a line or a sentence, and the boy would know
exactly what chapter,
everything,
everything he needs to know about the book.
everything about the book. So along this journey, Michael B. Jordan's character Montauk is kind of trying to figure out what's going on. He's seeing these books and he's filling the pages and he's starting to get curious. The part about it that annoyed me so was the boss, Beatty, was the one who encouraged him to explore. They were in this grand library and he told them, like, look at one before the others come back. And he gave him this whole speech about why they burned, like the whole conversation we just had about critical race theory, about the Holocaust, and all of these things that they didn't want the people to read and become unhappy. He told them about all of these things. He fostered that curiosity, had him pick up, look at, smell the book.
He almost forced him. Like,
forced him.
Read a couple pages. Read
He did force him.
Yeah, like, even if he didn't want to do it, he was like, okay, I guess
He have to. Only to, in the end, be the one to go and bust up his house. And I couldn't tell if they planted those books on him or if he had really just been collecting a book each fire, but I'm pretty sure they planted the book on him because we only saw him take one book, and he had that book and he was reading it, but the words didn't even mean anything to him. So he ends up going to another character that's in the story, and she's an eel. She's kind of a slick type of double agent, if you will. So she'll come to the salamanders or the firefighters to let them know, hey, I got this tip about, they got books over here, they got books over here. Sometimes it would be somebody with books, sometimes it wasn't. And the part that really got me when he was like, yeah, the last tip you gave me, all I got was a Boy Scout with some home videos. So it's like y'all are letting child pornography go unchecked. But, the books have to be burned. So that was the wild part about it to me. But Clarice, she was an eel through and through. She knew a lot of books. She belonged to certain tribes and groups of people who believed and upheld the value of the books, the knowledge, the history. So they end up kind of having this love around the book and with each other, in a sense, as he was learning the history. And it seems like he was just consistently going over there, like every day or often. And that was the part. He never got caught in the coming and going of Eel City, is what I look at.
It would have happened because they have cameras and stuff everywhere. It's like, how was he able to get through all these little compartments to get to where he was going?
Right. But like I said, he eventually gets found out that because they saw him getting into the truck with her. And so he gets found out and they burn his books. And I think in the book, I think it's the other way around in the book. Montauk kills Beatty in the book instead of someone else.
Because he killed the other
He killed the other fireman and just took off. And so, like I said, I've read the book plenty of times in the past, but to see the movie current day, being in this space where paper books aren't even really a thing anymore. Like, yeah, there are libraries that exist. Yeah, people sell paperbacks, but Kindles, iPads, e-readers.
I got me a little Libby on my phone.
I got Libby too. Audible. There are all these things that move us away from paper books. So that was one thing that is, when Kindles came out, I remember being the nerd. Being being like, no, the next thing you know, it's going to be Fahrenheit 451 and we can't read paper books. Everything's just going to have to be on the internet where they can change it at their will. And that's what they're moving to, because now they're saying how certain books where people are having Audible or an e-reader version of the book, they've noticed that something's changed. It's been edited a few times and they can't go back to that original version. So that's one reason why I love paper books.
I'm a paper book person.
I still have a library shelves and everything.
When I was in school, same way. Like, I need to actually be able to look at the book, highlight it. Yeah, that's just me in general. I wish more kids. I feel like a lot of kids don't even know about paper. Well, they know about paper books, but they prefer like audible.
Yeah, and that brings me to my mom. My mom was so set on getting my child a tablet for her birthday, and me and my husband were just kind of like, we don't necessarily want her to have a tablet, but okay, whatever. But we still make sure that she picks up her paper books, and we read those paper books. We don't read from the tablet at all. So it's definitely interesting. So how did you feel about the movie?
Overall, I think it was well put together. The only thing that I'm not sure if this happened in the book because I read the book so long ago, but you know how it ends and it just kind of is like on a cliffhanger, like we just don't know where the bird went.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that kind of like made me like, it kind of like leaves you at like a cliffhanger. Of, like, did they figure it out? Was the bird able to make it? Did the information get passed on? Or is Michael B. Jordan Montab? Is he like cat? Well, he was burnt up basically. So it's like, was everything he did in vain?
Well, the bird got out.
The
So
bird did get out, but I'm like, where did the bird go? Like, how did the bird know to get to Canada?
And that was the thing that as we talked about, I was critiquing about the movie. So the bird was the holder of all of the knowledge, the golden child who remembered all the books. He had this bird that his mom, who was a geneticist, put all of this information in so that they can replicate it and put it in all of the other animals. One, I was confused, like, why animals?
Right, yeah.
They don't have the vocabulary to put this on, but you never know exactly. It's a sci-fi movie, so there could definitely be ways. But my critique of it was like, why do they have this bird in the cage? That bird could have been to Canada.
Okay, you saw how quickly he put the little tracker thing on it, and then it just flew away. I'm like, we could have did this 30
We could have
years
did this forever ago. So that was the wild part to me, how the ominous, the keeper of all the knowledge was this bird, and then he just puts the tracker on it, and it just flies on through the hole. Hopefully gets to the geneticist mom to replicate all that knowledge.
That was like my only real critique, because I'm just like, well, we kind of need a part 2 there or something. I didn't know like that the bird made it. Can somebody please let me know that all this didn't just happen for no reason?
We are the birds. We are the birds. So I have a couple questions. What character would you say you most related to in the movie? I'll start while you think.
Okay.
I'm definitely Montag, I would say, because I could see where, you see the image of your dad doing this thing, so you would want to follow that because that's what you know. But you still have questions about it, and when those questions arise, you're not just going to sweep it under the rug like the other firemen may have done. And he really went to seek that knowledge. Now, he did it to the detriment of himself, but it was definitely for the greater good of all people. So I think I related to him the most.
Okay, so in the movie, you know how you keep him, the dad was coming up. I thought his dad was reading books. So that's what ended up happening. So he was starting to have flashbacks of his father doing something that he wasn't supposed to do.
But the father was a fireman, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So he was following the same footsteps.
So basically, my thing was the dad had to have known the other firefighter, the new commander. So in a sense, I was wondering if that's the reason why he was like so fond of making sure that.
Yeah, they were friends. The dad and Beatty were friends, so that's why he wanted to raise him up to be the new sergeant, basically. So every time he slipped, he was like, well, I can't recommend you to replace me if you are here trying to know knowledge and not taking your drops and trying to read books. Because I got a little confused with the flashbacks, too, because they ended up burning the dad, like, you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I was like, okay, so how was he a firefighter? Well, now it all makes sense. I couldn't figure out, like, his dad was more on the side where he understood that the firefighters weren't necessarily supposed to be creating fires, or if he was, always on the side of with the omnis where he was trying to like connect the dots and give the geneticist the information.
Right.
So if I had to pick, it's somewhere in between Montab and the girl's
Clarice.
And I would say more so maybe Clarice, because once I have like a feeling about something, a very strong feeling, I just stand on that. Like it's really hard for you to change my mind once my
Mhm.
mind is made. And she was very vocal to him about like, why is it that you are so adamant to believe that you're supposed to be burning books up, or what is it like? Why are you making these decisions? So basically, asking those hard questions. I want us to like to ask questions to make sure I'm understanding like why it is that I'm doing the things that I'm doing.
Mhm. Mhm. And do you think that we as a society could actually reach the point to where we burn books?
Yeah, I do. It's scary to think like that, but yeah, like the movie is not that far off.
It's not,
Like you said with
especially,
the little Alexa, like if she
yeah,
was listening, like she would be like, okay, yeah, and
everything.
it's already to that kind of where we have so much access to technology that
Mhm.
they are able to see what you're doing and hear what you're doing, pick up on those things. So if that's already in place, if they wanted to completely ban something, it's not impossible. It would kind of be like when they did the alcohol ban. So like
Mm.
these things, it's a reoccurring theme. Like it's reoccurring, and that goes back to like even when we were talking about earlier how book bans. This isn't new. It just happens in waves.
Just happens in waves. So whatever that those new books that have been written in the past 10, 15, 20 years, sweep them on in the category too. I think out of my 2 year old's library, she has about 8 banned books. And they're about bold leaders. Little Bold Leaders is one that's telling you about black people who invented things or discovered things or the first to do things. That's one of the books on the banned list. So it's crazy to think about. It's definitely crazy to think about, especially to see it in this movie and just look around at the book
I wonder if
bans.
they would go as far as to burn books and to make firefighters that their main, thing. That would be like interesting
Mhm.
if it was ever to get to that point.
Mhm.
But yeah, I could definitely see book bans becoming way more extensive, especially with
Mhm.
all the bills being passed, with all the gag orders and stuff of that nature. Especially if it's being funded.
That
When they're
part.
funding stuff, okay, well yeah, if I don't like it, you're not about to have it.
That part exactly. So let us know what you think. We're gonna set up some surveys, not surveys. What's the thing?
Questionnaires,
Polls.
polls.
So let us know what you think. We're gonna set up some polls with these questions to get some of your answers and see how you feel about this week's episode.
Yeah, definitely check out that movie if y'all haven't seen it. There's a bunch of books that y'all should read. So if you're into this topic about the banned books, definitely look into some of the banned books and see if you think that they have themes that should be available for young adults or children and things of that nature. Okay, so make sure y'all follow our pages, Hood Health Report on Instagram and Facebook, Hood Health Pod on Twitter. Make sure you like, comment, tag, post, repost, comment.
Watch us on YouTube.
Yeah.
And that's it for today.
See
Thanks
y'all.
and bye.